Make Weird Music is happy to welcome our good friend, all the way from Berlin, Germany, Mr. Markus Reuter. How are we doing today, Marcus?
Hey, sir, good to see you.
To see you too. We keep running into each other on the internets here, which is a great thing. But
We
always
are.
happy to do so.
And hopefully see you in the US next year
Oh, absolutely.
for the Stickman tour. Chicago, I think we're playing at
April,
Reggie's again, right?
April 19th at Reggie's. I will be there. Even if I'm recuperating from surgery, I will be there on a gurney, sitting there in the front row. Rest assured, I will be there to see you. I can't wait. We're hoping that everything comes off, and there was a time when we would just say April 19th will be at Reggie's, and I'd just say I'd be there. But COVID is still hanging around. It's still kind of, it's still making things challenging. Long-term planning is difficult. How has COVID been treating you this past year?
Yeah, it's. I was in a way I was lucky that I was in Japan when I experienced the first lockdown in Japan, and I was there for another because we're supposed to play a tour with Stickman and featuring Gary Husband, and
Right.
we played one show, and then the lockdown started, and it was it was on the way back to Narita Airport, where I saw that the motorway was completely empty. Like normally it takes 45 minutes to get there from the city center, and it was only 20 minutes, and I was there, and I realized,
Wow.
okay, something must be not right. And I got to the airport, and I saw like 15 people on the way from the entrance of the airport to the gate. And I realized, okay, something's really, really wrong here.
Right.
And I still remember I was flying back to Berlin via Helsinki, and in Helsinki everything was normal, open. Everything was open, and it was that clash of these kind of two worlds where I realized, okay, something is really deeply off balance here, and this is gonna come to us. And I was so clever to kind of realize I don't even need to dream or hope for shows. I need to find something else to do. I need
Right.
to find some other line of work. Since that I've always been, I have to say, forced to work in many different fields. I mean, always trying to work within the field of music, but I do music production, I teach, I perform, right? But
Right.
and I distribute, I sell my own music and everything, and so I knew, okay, performance is going to be off the table for a while, and it was my main income, right? It was my main income, and I kind of could count on a specific on kind of an average. I knew what the average was going to be, touring with Stickman in a year. I knew how much I was going to have, and so it was just a very quick decision. Let's do something else, and I started, the acquisition process of finding clients, and it went okay. I did work for I think maybe 13 months, kind of really hard work. So that means into May 2021.
Right.
And then I realized, okay, I can't do this anymore. I got totally burned out because I have a young daughter. She was only 6 months when the first lockdown came.
Goodness.
So, and you know what it's like if you're a father and you need to and you want to provide for your family.
Sure.
So I just went into this trance of trying to make money and also of trying to stay sane and trying to stay in contact with people that I've usually met on the road. And it was really super instructional for me to see how important being on the road was for me, not just the playing or not just the money, but also the social aspect. So, and that's why, in addition to, I did lots of mastering jobs, mixing jobs, lots of private lessons, and And in addition to that, I started this Living the Dream series of online events, which were basically like Zoom discussions with like you could say group workshops or edutainment style.
Right.
Some were like interviews with guests, and some were talking about my soundscaping setup, explaining how I get guitar sounds and how I do the looping and stuff like that. And that became sort of like the substitute for being for meeting people after shows, and just having people there, and that then morphed into. I mean, I'm still doing the Living the Dream events, but only occasionally, and now I'm regularly doing a podcast. I'm trying to put out 2 conversations every week, and I have released 70. Will have released 70 episodes by the end of 2021, and. Yeah, but like really, if you ask me, like there are many positive things about being at home, getting to spend time with my daughter,
Sure.
Having the time to kind of like look at the things that I have been procrastinating for years, right? But then realizing how incredibly slow even like the working off that old to-do list basically is, and how to really understand what the real reasons for procrastinating a certain activity kind of was, right? So I have to say I really learned a lot, but the real negative side effect for me is the burnout, which I really did not want to experience again, because I had like a serious case of burnout in 2014.
Right.
And I'm kind of like a believer in 7-year cycles, and yeah, there you go, 14, 21, right?
You were pretty much on schedule then. Okay.
Yeah.
It's got to be off-putting for a professional musician who's used to traveling, who's used to knowing that he's not going to be home for a certain period throughout the year, to suddenly realize that I'm still here. I mean, that's so to wake up in the morning and look around and see your bedroom has got to be great, but at the same time, it's what am I still doing here? I mean, how long does it take to adjust to something like that?
Yeah, you see, for me, it was always back and forth between being on the road and being at home. So that means like, but for me, it was relatively easy, right? But thinking about Pat and Tony and Stickman, they were always on the road.
Right.
So, like, I don't know what it must have been like for them. For me, it was kind of, like I said on the beginning, it was okay because it simply just turned around 180 degrees and I did something else. Right. And like got into that hypnotic state of survival, right?
Right.
So, but I remember like the very first really long tour that I was on was with Two of a Perfect Trio, with Adrian Belew and Adrian Belew's trio and Stickman in 2011, and I can't remember exactly, but I think we played over 40 shows on that tour, so it must have been something like 7 weeks. And when I got home, it took me, it was probably 3 or 4 months to recover from that. Like, so I was really not prepared. I didn't know how to handle that. And now I'm much better. And, the interesting thing is, like, once you kind of like get to be a professional musician, and maybe this also applies to like any other job, like you really only know what you were doing and what you got from it when you don't have it anymore.
Right.
And especially if you then go back to it. Right, because then you see what, and I had the opportunity to play 2 shows this year. In October, I played 2 shows, and I wasn't so sure if going back on stage was going to be the same, different, worse, better than before, right?
Right.
And it really turned out to be a very, very positive event for me that showed to me that that music comes first to me, for me, right? Like being on stage and being able to kind of like create that sound, that was like very, very satisfying. And I realized, okay, I'm really missing this. And I'm missing the community, the communal aspect of getting together and celebrating music with the audience. And yeah, I mean, I have to say, kind of grateful for having this experience now, because like going back on the road, I will appreciate it much more than I ever did before.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. It's got to be difficult, like I said a bit ago, to make long-term plans right now, because we just don't know. You know, there's a variant here, there's a mask, or there's requirements here to make things difficult. Have you reached that stage where you kind of have a plan B in mind? Okay, I'm supposed to be here, but if I can't do that, I'm going to do this.
Yeah. So you see, like I've lived most of my life as an artist, meaning that I'm trying to get inspired by whatever I face, right? So it's different. I always have plans, and I always have a plan B. And I think like at the beginning of the lockdowns in 2020, I put that plan into place right away, very quickly. Right now, I feel like I really don't want to do that. What I want to do is I want to be open to whatever is going to happen.
Okay.
If that makes any sense. Like,
it does.
Because if you know, in a musical career, your path is pretty much kind of like predefined by the people you know, or the people you hang out with, or the people that you get to meet, right? So like for me, it's rather than planning, I'm more curious to meet new people. And so whatever kind of helps me to meet new people is what I'm going to do. So that's some sort of meta plan, right? It's not concrete, but that's kind of what I need to do in order to survive. Because I can't, I feel it would be irresponsible to believe that things will go back to the way they were before, right?
Right.
Or B, to even come back at all.
Right.
Right. So yeah, like I always have plan B, C, D, E, F, and in my position, I probably have to still pick 2 or 3 to get by.
Makes sense.
So like one job is not enough to pay your rent. I mean, I know that that's pretty much like the case for a lot of Americans, right? Like you have to have a couple of jobs, right?
Yep, absolutely.
But I'm still self-employed. I've been self-employed officially for 21 years now, and I've been working sort of like as a self-employed person even before that. And I'm open to the idea to get employed if there's a good salary. Right, like I would even do that at this point. But yeah, I just want to remain open and to see what opportunities are going to come. And so far, my life has been treating me well, and my attitude has led to new opportunities. So I think that's not going to change. Excellent.
Well, let's talk about what you were able to accomplish in this past year. You mentioned your podcast, and coming up on your 70th episode, I was honored to be one of your guests early on. That was a great chat. What spurred you to do the podcast in the first place? I've had this idea to do an interview, like a talk show kind of style of show. Like I've had that idea maybe in 2008 already. It was when I was just like brainstorming with a friend called Nick Bertsch, a pianist from Zurich. Oh yes.
And we had this idea to let's do a talk show that's called "It's Lonely at the Top." Right, that was kind of like the inside joke, like to say, okay, let's find people that we can talk to about things that you that don't get talked about on TV, right? Like because like there are some pretty good like talk shows or interview shows in German speaking public television, right? But they only ever go so far, and like for me there was always like, okay, come on now, ask that next question where I'm really interested in the answer, and they always stop there. And so that was my idea a long time ago. Then I started doing these edutainment Zoom events, Living the Dream, and it turned out that some of the sort of moderated interviews that I did came out really great, and somehow I just learned that I'm a good moderator, and so the podcast then happened because I had a young man, a drummer, Sean Crowder, contact me that he wanted to learn touch guitar with me, and he suggested, and like we came up with the idea to turn that into a YouTube series, right, and to do a series of videos. And so he actually, like the first episode of the podcast is Sean interviewing me about the touch guitar, and that was sort of like the initial. That was the starting point to say, okay, I'm just going to do this. And like the second guest on the show was Sid Smith, an old friend of mine, and like from then on it just went like on and on. I started putting together these lists of people that I wanted to talk to, and you were one of the very first that I did talk to, and also that I thought about talking to, and it was just sort of like the idea to do something that does not have any particular aim. It was just about getting together with people and, let's have a good time and let's be good to each other. I really wanted to talk to people that also wanted to talk to me. Like that was like the only criterion, like that was important to me. Cedric, if you want to talk with me, if you feel like you want to talk to me, let's do it. Right? And it turned into something, I find into something really beautiful.
It definitely went places I didn't think it was going to go. We wound up talking a lot more about my life in law enforcement, which I'm now retired from, and I anticipated, this will be a musical discussion. We'll talk about music, and we went in a completely different direction, but it seemed to work out really well.
Yes, and because and I mean this may sound corny, but it's true. Like I'm interested in you as a person, right? Like obviously we have the music in common. We love music, and that's how we met. But I've always been interested in the let's say like the expertise and knowledge of people that I know, but a lot of people don't share their expertise, and that was sort of like the idea of that. It's lonely at the top, right? Like I want you to talk about the things that you really can't talk about much, right? Or don't talk about much, at least not with people that are not within the same profession, right? And that has become sort of like the theme. And obviously, because I know so many musicians, there are quite a few musicians. But if you're just following the conversations, like I don't know. I haven't timed it, but I think it's maybe 50% of the time that we talk about music, but the other 50% we talk about just the world, people,
right,
and experiences, the human condition.
Right. And it's a big world out there. There's a lot of things to talk about, besides music, even though music is, for me, the best thing to talk about. There's a much bigger world out there.
But for me, I've been like a real nerd, and the German word for nerd is Fachidiot, which means like you're because you're focusing only on one specific subject, you become an idiot because you stop learning about other things, right? So that's the German. The German's words are very descriptive, and it's pretty good one. I love it. And And so, I was also like realizing, okay, I do want to talk about other things. I want to learn about what other people do. I'm kind of like, in a way, it's may even be a little bit sad, because kind of like realizing that as a musician, like when something like the situation with the pandemic happens, there's no value left about what you do. Like it's which is like, I'm exaggerating, but you know what I mean.
Right.
There's no way to actually make a living, right? So that's why I really enjoy learning about other things. I've started watching a lot of talks about mathematics and philosophy and like subjects that I've always been very interested in. But now I have kind of like acquired some knowledge that, without the pandemic, I would not have had the time. And like the podcast is kind of like part of that same fabric, let's say, right? Just to widen my horizon and to find inspiration, just like on a human level, like emotionally, not necessarily for my art.
Makes sense. It makes sense. If there's such thing as a benefit to isolation, I think you've stumbled over it.
Yes.
What else is going on in your musical world? Where are things headed right now?
Yeah. So early in the year, when there was like daycares were locked down and stuff like that, I got really antsy, and I felt like, oh, come on, I do need to make music at it. And then I inquired, is it possible? Is it allowed to go into a studio and to work there? And then they were like, because it was a commercial endeavor, different rules applied, and it was actually possible. The studio was big enough, and we were only like 5-6 people in that room, and so it was allowed. And
right.
And I organized like 2 days, 2 days of recording in a studio in Dresden, close to Dresden, in Germany, and it was incredible. Like I brought 3 other musicians, and we performed as a band that's now called Anchor and Burden, and we recorded. We recorded for almost 2 days, and as a result, we have like 5 albums of that band.
Oh, wow.
1 solo album of mine and 1 solo album of Bernhard Röshanig, who plays keyboards in the band.
Okay.
And so it's a 7 album cycle. And I was like the artistic producer, but also the executive producer, kind of like giving them money to make it possible. And it was like the best decision I could have made to invest into creating the opportunity to play music and to create music and to compose in real time. And that sort of like put me back on the map creatively this year. And after that, there was a lot. I mean, there were like a couple of, a lot of releases actually that had, accumulated and that were not put out last year. And, but Anchor and Burden, okay, so that name, okay, what does it mean? Like, what is the Anchor and Burden? So if you look at the solo album Anchor and Burden, Markus Reuter,
mm-hmm.
at the bottom, there's like something on it that looks like a tarot card. It's not, but at the bottom of the card it said Musica 21. So that's the cue. That's the it's actually about my music, especially this year and in the pandemic, was my anchor as well as my burden, and the music is supposed to be about that, right?
Okay.
So it's a concept album or a series of albums. Based on this idea that of the power of music to bring you both, to bring both, how shall I say this, constructive energy, but the lack of, has quite a bit of destructive energy.
I understand.
And like I said, like investing into that project was the best thing I could have done this year. And then a lot of other things followed, including a recording session with Truce, with my trio with Fabio Trentini and Asaf Sirkis. And that album is actually going to come out very soon, like in early January. And that has been a very, very interesting experience. So Anchor and Burden in the studio was incredibly inspiring. Because there was so much freedom, and like it was as if the knot was bursting, right? Somehow. And then with going into the studio with Fabio and Asaf, because it's the follow-up album to Truce, the first album. So Truce, now called Truce 1, and now we have Truce 2. And as you may know, as you know that as a writer, like you have to write your first book, and writing your second book is very difficult, right? Because you have a reference point,
right?
And so what happened to us was that we were there in the studio. We played maybe the first 5 minutes of music, recorded the first 5 minutes of music, and I realized, okay, we're trying to go back to what we did 2 years ago. And that didn't work at all. It was painful. It was really like there was like a moment where I was thinking, can I do this at all? Right? Like it's impossible. It's impossible. And it was as if we had become a new band that had not played already. Right? And so it was like we're still the same people. Like we look kind of the same 2 years later, but as if we had different souls.
Well, I would almost argue, as a writer, I can feel what you're feeling, because creativity belongs to a certain moment in time, and it can be difficult to reproduce that particular moment because you're not supposed to reproduce it. That moment is past. So now you basically had to write a new vocabulary for the next project.
Yeah, you see, that is very true. However, like I was so happy with that vocabulary that we had found for the first album, that I wouldn't have minded to make a part two. Let's say. Right. So, but it did not turn out like that. The good thing is that as sort of like experienced musicians, even though I felt quite a bit of frustration in the first, say, like I don't even know how many hours it was. Maybe it was only 30 minutes. I don't know. But but there was a certain frustration to just say, okay, no, come on, I have to let go of all the ideas, and I mean not concrete ideas, but like of this idea for an approach or a sort of like lightness. Like the Truce One album has a certain lightness to it,
right?
Even though it's quite powerful, but. And so, okay, let's just say, okay, we're gonna be kind of submissive to the situation, right? And let's see what happens. And the pieces that then arrived, like really floored me in such a way that I had a very, very hard time to appreciate them. Like and this is really like for people who don't have this kind of experience, it's difficult to explain what it's like. It's like as if you're putting something out into the world and you don't even like it.
Right.
That's what it feels like. But I do like it, but I did not understand. Right.
It takes time to appreciate what's happened. Would you say that comes from a feeling of prior expectation, or from a lack of desire to reinvent the wheel, as it were? You know, is that what you're going through? That particular process?
I think it's both of that, and then it's the fact that I hadn't been practicing. Like normally, I would be practicing before I go into the studio, like maybe just 2 weeks of just warm up, or like get limber again.
Right.
I didn't do that. Asaf couldn't do that. For a drummer, it's extremely important to be fit, right? Like,
right.
And so. Those were certainly factors, but I really think like what I just said, that I think our souls had changed. Like we're not the same people, so it was impossible to approach it with the same lightness. There was just more heaviness on our shoulders. It was just like it's kind of a sad thing, like because Truce One or the Truce band after the first album was supposed to be on the road.
Right.
We had festivals booked, and we were supposed to go into the studio in early 2020 already, right? So it was like so the second album, the recording was already a year late. There had been no touring, and so everything about what we thought what the band would be about was basically, nil.
And now you have no choice but to have your mindset change just based on that information. That's going to alter your brain chemistry, right then and there.
Yeah. And so what happened was that the pieces are just much freer in a sense, and just tell a very different story, you could say. With Truth One album, it's like the whole album is like a story. Like they're like very distinct chapters. So with the second album, each chapter is as rich as the whole of the first album. Right. That's how I would describe it. Like so, and they're like real extremes from like real beauty to something like really like very punkish energy, and also like, and this is another important factor here, and I know you're interested about hearing about music production. We had a co-producer. We had a co-producer in the studio for the second album, and it's the engineer Stefano Castagna, who, like whenever you have people in the studio, like Leonardo Pavkovic, and Leonardo Pavkovic, he usually, like most of the time, he puts out albums that he sort of like say co-produced because he was in the studio as they were recorded. So his energy, right, kind of like shapes the music. And so that's like that's why, I don't know, I have not watched the Beatles documentary that everybody's talking about, but I heard that Yoko was sitting next to John like
the entire time.
That has a huge influence.
Yes.
Right? Like having people there, and it can be good, can be bad, whatever. Like, I don't want to be judgmental about it, but it was, like Truth came out, as such a surprise, the second album. I had to live with it for a while. Now I'm getting very excited because the release is imminent, and I'm really looking forward to people's response.
I'm looking forward to hearing it myself. And you just had me thinking about John and Yoko there for a second. And my personal opinion, I've been in love, okay, but that doesn't mean I want the love of my life sitting right there while I'm working. But that was good for John. If I'm part of the rest of the band, I'm looking over like, okay, you can be here, but I need you to be out of eyesight for a second, or maybe she was just a buffer, to keep them being civil to one another. I don't know. I wasn't there, and
I don't know. I think it's part of my work ethic, and also of the way that like Pat and Tony and like people like that work. There's like a really there's sort of an etiquette. Right. When it comes to touring, when it comes to performance, also when it comes to recording. And I think that, the staying out of the way, let's say, like being respectful toward the creative process, let's say, is very important. Right. So you can't really have people come visit while you're doing an improvised record. Of course you can. Maybe for some people it doesn't matter. For me, it doesn't matter.
Well, it changes the energy.
It changes the energy, yes. And it's because, even if it's just kind of like puts like one little thought in your head, right? Yep. And you say, okay, like maybe there's a guitarist in the control room, so maybe maybe I need to play something that the guitarist would like. Right? I don't want that kind of thought in my head when I'm creating. But it's unavoidable. It happens to me. And it does happen to me, and that's why I think the ideal situation for recording music is without anybody listening. I say that like when you're making a studio record, right? When you're making a live record, then obviously you want the audience there,
right? Yeah. But by the time the audience is in front of you for a live record, you found that energy, that vibe that you needed to bring the record to life in the first place. You weren't out to impress anybody in the studio per se, because there was nobody staring at you waiting for something spectacular to happen.
Yes, and at the same time, like the fact that, like you just used the word spectacular, I think that the results are most of the time more spectacular if there are no spectators.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Because you can kind of like the way that I do it, at least, is like I go for the complete experience of letting go. Right. So just kind of like disengage my judgmental parts, let's say.
Right.
And just move my fingers and I mean, like everybody would might maybe expect me to say that I listen deeply or something, which I do. Right. But even the listening is something that is not judgmental at all, right? So it's only about acceptance, accepting anything that happens, and all of that gets on the page, right? You can edit later, right? But like all that stuff gets on the page, and that is the beauty, and that's where the spectacular stuff happens, because you it's like this, you allow happy accidents to take place. Exactly.
At the risk of sounding self-indulgent, when you said acceptance, I was so happy, because that was the precise word I was thinking of. You just have to be ready to accept whatever comes into the universe at that particular moment, and that can be hard to do when somebody's staring at you, or when you're looking at somebody trying to say, "Oh, you like that riff? How about I do that again?" That's a complete distraction. Production. I have seen producers' credits for ages on end, be it George Martin or Rick Rubin or whomever, but I've never really sat down and thought about what it is a producer does, from moment to moment. And I'm sure it varies from producer to producer, but you're a producer. Walk me through one of your projects and what you do as a producer.
Yeah. Well, you've said it. There are many different ways that one can be producer, and the definition actually has also changed quite a bit since almost everybody can create electronic music at home with your with your laptop or your computer, right?
Right.
And so the word producer has become sort of like kind of meaningless, right? But I can explain how I see it. Like for me, I'm sort of like responsible to make sure the project gets completed.
Okay.
So then, if I have responsibility for the money, let's say, I need to make sure it's spent well.
Right.
Okay. And then the third part, which is kind of like the most important to me, is I am part of the creative energy. So, and that means sort of like getting into that vibe, let's say, and you can be the angel or you can be the devil. Like there is no, I can be either. And sometimes I can be even just like on the technical side, but really in terms of the energies, it is quite often about challenging the musicians to create musical meaning. Is this like kind of like this is difficult topic, but I'm going to talk about it.
Go for it.
Because you can, for example, you can play a piece of music because you've written it as a band, right? And never think about why you go from A to B or how you go from A to B. Right? Okay. In the moment where you're becoming aware of that's what you do, you have kind of looked at, say, a transition from one section to the other, you start understanding that this is the way it's supposed to be. It's not something that I just do because it's habit or it's habitual. It's something that I do automatically. No, it's something that I do because I know this is right. And this is kind of like what I try to give people in the studio, to get them to the point where they can sort of like feel at ease with their creation, and where it's not something that is just like the trash that you create while you're taking a candy out of the wrapper, right? And you throw the wrapper away. Like that's not the respect that I have for music. So for me, there needs to be a certain depth to the emotional expression, and that does not mean that I'm telling a singer, say, okay, sing this word louder or put more emotion into that phrase, or it's quite the opposite. Like most of the time, people do that anyway, right? So what I'm doing is, okay, here, relax, just sing it. It's gonna be fine. It's great. Like it's like a lot of people, they work with the idea to get better performances. I think that the performances that the performance that an artist delivers is always the best performance. Obviously, I'm not talking about somebody singing a wrong note or singing a wrong word, or it's not about that. It's like I think the expression of an artist is like most authentic when it's unrehearsed, right? So I'm trying to kind of like give all of these different inputs that make something authentic, exciting, kind of like true also to the process. Ideally effortless, however, sometimes there can even be tears. Like I've had one experience where somebody was crying, and that way, but even that was the right thing. Ultimately, she delivered, like an amazing performance once she realized what she had done before. But again, like she was not aware of what she was doing. Once she became aware of what she was doing, like the whole thing kind of like went to another level. And so basically, it's like, when you play guitar, I know, you pick up the instrument, and if you were writing songs or if you were recording, you would, your aim would be, okay, I sit down, I play my part, and there's the recording. So you play with the instrument and you create a product, right?
Right.
So for me as a producer, I work with the people. The people are the instruments. And I play the instrument that is the people in the studio. It's like it's like that position, and like those people are. It's not that they are my toys. It's not like that. It's not how I mean it. But I give them that meta perspective, and the funny thing is that I was really of the opinion that like anything I touch is not going to be successful, because of my taste. I guess that's what it is,
Right.
But turns out that two of my recent productions actually got an award this year. Actually, won a very prestigious award here in Germany, and it's a really fascinating process. On the other hand, like production can also be to, you sent me the files, the tracks you recorded, and you asked me, can you turn that into digestible music, into something that sounds good or whatever.
So that makes you more Teo Macero.
But that is it's a really wide field, and basically for me it's just, can you make something happen? Can you help people to actually finish something? That's how I see it. And sometimes I don't have to do anything, right?
Right. Your approach strikes me as almost jazz-like, in that you're not looking for a specific note. You're looking for a specific feeling, or to encourage that particular feeling. It doesn't really matter what the note turns out to be, especially in a more improvisational context.
Exactly. But, Rick Rubin, for example, he's like that famous producer who is also a little bit like that, and I heard stories about him that maybe he's not even there.
Yeah.
Right? All he does is he does the initial meeting, right?
Right.
And he has his people, and he knows exactly. Okay, no, we're gonna use that engineer, and because he has creative ideas. Okay, what would it be like to have Johnny Cash sing cover songs,
right?
And then use kind of like basic instrumentation, and there's a hit record.
Yeah. Let's redo a Soundgarden tune.
Yes,
with Johnny and Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers as his backing band, and it's brilliant.
It's brilliant, right?
It's
brilliant.
Absolutely brilliant. Whereas I have the Frank Zappa Hot Rats box set, the sessions, and you can hear Frank just demanding this particular note in this particular spot at that particular moment. So that's yet another approach. No, I don't want it there. I want you to play this here like this.
Exactly. and you are absolutely right. I'm definitely on the other side. Like, I don't need that particular note. However, I do write music as well that needs that precision.
Right.
But even if you have that sort of precision, then on top of that, again, is a level of freedom. That is sort of, at least like my idea. Like the segment pieces, for example, most of them are fully written. So, however, like, there is always some wiggle room to make things feel slightly differently, right? To use a different kind of sound. Like Tony's great in improvising, changing bass parts on the go, or like changing the feel, and these are just. That's why, like, improvisation, composition, it's not like two different pairs of shoes. There's it's a continuum, and I see that in production as well. Like, yeah. And Frank Zappa is really like, it's not a good example for somebody who allows total freedom in composition.
Well, like I said, I see you more as a Teo Macero who produced Miles Davis's records in the '60s, and especially when he started to do the electric stuff. When in a Silent Way and Bitches Brew and on, where it was just basically, we're in the studio and we're going to play, and then Teo would go back with the tape and the razor blade and kind of piece things together. That's kind of that's what I hear you doing when you talk about people sending you files.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's something I could be doing, but just like that's why Bitches Brew is such a great record, because it's not just the assembly, let's say, of the recordings. It's also the fact that the band actually got into the mood to do something like that, where like maybe, I don't know, maybe 50% of the musicians would say, this is shit. Right, or I don't enjoy this, or where's the form, or how can you play like two wrong bass notes at the same time, right? And like stuff like that, and all these judgmental stuff that all of us, most of us have, because we're being socialized. We listen to a certain kind of music, and especially in the 60s and 70s, to do something as drastic as that is genius, and I think that's where the producer is important. You need kind of somebody to allow a certain thing to take place, and that's why Leonardo is great as sort of like a producer or like a facilitator, right? You kind of like he chooses people, puts them together in a room, and then smiles, because he's so happy about, and the smile is an important part of that feedback loop that's happening, right?
That's energy right there.
Yeah.
Well, what about one of your more recent production outputs, the Pact project with Percy Jones and
that's a good example. Like with Pact, I have nothing to do with the recording of it. Right. So I think like about a year ago, I can't remember, they did their first shows, and Leonardo sent me, or Tim Motzer sent me the files, and I mixed the first like I think the very first performance they played together, I mixed that, and that became a double album on Moonshine Records. And ever since they have, whenever they have an opportunity to play, they have a little. They ask, the sound guy to record.
Right.
And so it's interesting because, like, I was complaining about that yesterday because they sent me a new set of files and nothing's labeled. So and so okay, this track, okay, that's bass, that's Percy, right? Like, that's easy. But if it comes to the drums with the microphones, and especially with, like, you don't know, was that supposed to be on the tom-tom or was it the hi-hat? You don't know because, like, with the bleed and the microphones and everything. And so kind of like the idea there is that they give me those files and I turn it into something, A, that works, B, that does not necessarily represent what it sounded like in the room, because it's impossible to recreate that.
Right.
And if you kind of like capture the room sound, like so many bootleggers do, well, like most of the time it doesn't sound that good.
Right.
So they're sort of like, so as a producer there, I'm basically the mixing and mastering engineer with the creative angle.
Okay.
So it starts at the beginning where I have to realize, okay, what is on this signal? What is this? Right? And then, okay, like now I know Alex on stage, Alex Skolnick is on the left side, Tim is on the right. Right? And so I have a few recipes now how I place the sounds. But each recording is a new challenge to get a good balance. Like, as you know, like the energy may be completely different from show A to show B, or even between set 1 and set 2. And my task is to just kind of like make the music as for me, it's not so much about the power; it's about how emotionally engaging I can get.
Right.
And I do that also without. I'm not editing anything. So I make a mix of the whole show, and then send it to Tim Malzer, and he selects the best bits. He names, he finds titles, and then we cut it up. I master it, and then it's put out on Bandcamp.
Makes sense.
And I think we've put out like 4 shows or so this year already, and they've just done another handful of shows, and I've just started working on those. So it's a completely different way of seeing the producer role, because it can happen at any part of the process. Like, even like if you would just say like you have some sort of creative input, that's what I would call production in that sense. So even a mastering engineer, well, I think mastering engineers have a big influence on the production. They are part of the production team. They are producers as well, because they kind of like have they can decide ultimately what the album is going to sound like.
Right.
And there again, we have Rick Rubin. Like, okay, you have a great team, right? You kind of like know you want to try these people. You still have the freedom to say at the end, okay, let's get 2 mastering engineers and let's compare, right? So if you have that kind of budget,
that's the key right there. Is the budget. Because it's hard for me to imagine anybody telling Percy Jones what to play. I mean, the man's a legend. He's been around for ages. You don't just walk in and say, no, that really should be A flat there, as opposed to...
No. And nobody would do that, because that's not the kind of music where you would do that. But, this is an interesting topic, because I think that what happens in a musical career is that you sort of find your path, you find your niche, and you also, ideally, what you're good at. Right? So, like, I don't know. Would I want to play a bebop solo? No. I mean, I could. I mean, but it would not be a bebop solo. You know what I mean?
It's got to feel a little natural to you.
Yeah. So have somebody criticize me or ask me to play a bebop solo or play a different note here or there, it just doesn't make sense. And like whenever I realize that happens in a process where I'm being produced by others, it depends on the situation, but like sometimes I just realize, okay, like maybe I'm not your guy, or I say, okay, I'm just not gonna play those ones. Like even this may be interesting, even with Stefan, with Telan, right? Mm-hmm. He asks me certain things that annoy me, but I do it anyway, like because we're friends and it's a creative partnership, right? Right. So for example, he said, I have this piece here, Intergalactic Glitch Funk or whatever, and Markus, play something on this, but not too dissonant. Right? And so it's okay. It's okay because like in the end, like I just do what I do anyway. And by the way, he sent me, the way that we work is I send him files back, and then he produces them by editing them. Right. And he just sent me back a track that I recorded for 2 days ago. He sent it back to me today, and I'm very pleased with the results, I have to say. So there you go. Like, so maybe it's just like sometimes you have more than one producer, and musicians are producers as well, because like even if you have Rick Rubin, like Flea still comes up with his own bass parts. Right.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
That makes sense. And I think about the approaches that a lot of producers I would hear, like when I hear the sessions when Brian Wilson was putting Pet Sounds together, and and how they altered things, and the fact that he was willing to listen to his musicians. Well, Brian, what if I did this? And oh, hey, great idea. Let's try that. As opposed to taking the passive aggressive approach. You happy with that? Are you? That's the best you can do. Then that kind of thing.
Ever since multi-track recording came into the picture, right? In the musical history, that people say less is more, right? Mm-hmm. And to an extent, I get what that means. It's about quality, right? So maybe you can give more quality, by doing less. Yeah. With like these more modern productions, and like I said, starting with multi-track recording, especially the Beatles, right? Like George Martin. What happened is we have the studio available as another musician, as a creative tool. So I can ask somebody to come up with a new guitar part, like Paul can play a great bass part, but at the same time we can record this piano chord and reverse it, and so it's the studio, the possibilities you have in the studio are just like musical instruments that you can play an exciting phrase on, right? Something that makes things sound good or interesting or whatever, right? I
was just going to say the studio itself becomes an instrument, and you play the studio in addition to the instruments.
Yeah, and that's what great producers, like a certain kind of producer, does. Like George Martin, Brian Eno. Like the main guys who've kind of like started this idea of treatments, right? So you take something that has been recorded and you send it through something and re-record that, and that becomes sort of like something that you put inside the mix. So you create textures on top of, say, the organic performance that somebody played. A lot of like dub music, like where something like this kind of like started happening automatically because somebody discovered a certain aesthetic that happens if you use a certain delay, tape delay or something, and
Bill Laswell is good for that kind of thing. Yeah.
Yes, and like there are many musical styles that rely heavily on a technological gadget, right? And
Speaking of gadgets, and we'll head towards the finish line on this. I keep thinking about your soundscaping. I'm fascinated by your soundscaping, and I know you've got the video series out there.
Yes.
But, when you think about putting a soundscape together, where does that originate, say, between really three areas, between the head, the hands, and the pedal board?
And the heart, actually.
Four parts, yeah. The heart, the hands, and the pedal board. Absolutely. You win this round. If you could give me and this is going to be an American term, a C-spot run, run example of how you go through things. How would you say you approach that process?
So, like I said a few minutes ago, that it's important to know what you're good at as a musician.
Right.
So I think that's kind of like a good foundation if you want to create music on the spot. You need confidence in what you are capable of doing. So, like in my case, that means, I have, say I have my instrument, I know how to play it. I know I have a volume pedal, I know how to get a clean tone. I know how to fade it out so I don't get too much hiss to go into the looper or whatever, or into the pedal board. I have a certain palette of sound set up in the pedal board, and then from the pedal board that goes into like a looper system that I use, that I have on the laptop, right? So it's like kind of like three parts. So it's like, well, four. It's me, the guitar, the pedal board, the laptop, right? And so like I kind of like, I mean, there are different kinds of approaches that you could use. You could kind of like decide, okay, I want to do something. Say I'm being asked to record a texture for a pop tune that has like the chorus in D minor, and they want to have like my soundscape as a pad sound in the background for the chorus of their song.
Right.
So that means, okay, like I got to record something in D minor. So that means I have like I probably listen to the tune, and then I go deeper. I realize, okay, which notes of the D minor scale do they actually use, right? So to get an idea, which notes are safe. Right. So I know that, and then I have, okay, I pick like a sound, maybe to start with something that's kind of cloudy, like with lots of reverb and delay, and because I'm fading in the note, you're basically only hearing a beautiful kind of cloudy sound. You don't hear anything of the attack of the finger plucking or tapping the note, and so I, like in D minor, maybe I play an F note first. So and then I play another note, and I always keep listening to what comes back from the laptop. The laptop is recording what I do. It's recording those clouds, and then then I can say, okay, like say after like about 12 seconds, I want the first note I played to come back. So I go on playback, or it's actually called overdub, because the looper, as soon as you kind of like define its duration, its length, it starts going back as a loop. That's why it's called a loop, and it keeps recording. So that's why that state of the looper is called overdub mode. Right? Okay. So and then I can add notes on top. So I can play a note here, the loop runs, the play a note here, note here, play a note here, maybe here, and that's where like then the soundscape comes together. And this is kind of like a simple description for how that could be done. So basically it means you will have like layered versions of this cloudy sound coming from the pedal board, where you decide which pitches go into it by fretting the respective notes on the fretboard on the guitar.
Gotcha.
Right? And that's kind of like a sound mask that you can then export and send to somebody else to use or whatever. Next
to a jazz solo, an improvisational jazz solo, soundscaping doesn't get more in the moment than soundscaping is what I'm getting to. It doesn't sound like this is something that you can or even should plan extensively.
I mean, you can, and some people do this looping, which is not very cloudy, not very ambient, right? Where they want to have like an actual part, like a rhythm guitar part, for example, to back them, to sing over or something. Right. There are people who do that as well. But yeah, like the soundscaping approach, or this free improvised atmospheric textures, let's say, right? That is sort of like a genre or an idea unto itself.
That's almost post rock like. I think of like an Explosions in the Sky, where it's a clean, Fender riff, where you just try to create you create a loop. You come up with with a four bar phrase, and that repeats, and you just build on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, there are many genres that sort of like have the same idea, like minimal music, for example, like even the classical minimal music, right?
Right.
And you have, as you say, you have like post rock, but you have also doom rock, like and sludge, and like all these different styles that are kind of like slow, and where the idea is that a certain kind of hypnotic response kind of happens. So it's more like that for me. It's not so much. Again, I don't think in terms of genres so much. For me, It's more about like what do I experience as I'm creating this, and does this inspire me? And like usually, what I believe is that there's something that inspires me. It may inspire other people. It may sound interesting to other people,
okay.
and so yeah, that's it. And like for me, it definitely. Comes from what Robert Fripp did with Frippatronics originally. Like I was a big fan of Let the Power Fall, which is like these short tape delay loops with the fuzz sound, where you can actually hear like what I just described with the cloudy sound. You can hear it there with those very well defined fuzz notes of fuzz, and you can kind of like hear it. You can hear it goes like this. It plays on
right.
Right, and you can hear now add 20 years to that, and you have like digital devices that give you huge reverb, and like in Robert's case, that give you strings and pianos and
sounds from outer space and what have you.
Yes.
It's all just amazing stuff. How do you know when to stop? How do you build these loops? When do you know when it's time to let go?
Yeah, you don't really. That's one answer, and the other answer is you do know. You I started my musical, my more serious music career as a free improviser in an orchestra, free improvising orchestra, and so it is just something that happens because you. As you do it, you learn that there is a certain sign that most people in an ensemble get when it sounds like this is the end. There is sort of like a certain quality to. Let's wrap this up. I'm not talking about our conversation. Like there's a certain quality.
I see what you did there.
No, and seriously, there's a certain quality to it. But like there are a couple of performances, in particular, live in Pomona. I played at the university in Pomona, like it was 2016 or so, and I had a 2-hour slot or a 3-hour slot or something, and it was like, well, do I really? No, I'm just going to play a continuous performance. Like, why not? Like, I have the time. People let me play, and so and then like with this kind of technology, let's say you don't really you can always keep morphing things, and you can always have things evolve more. There is no such thing as an end. It becomes more of a ritual. If that makes any sense, it's different. It's a different idea. It's certainly not a song. It's like a personal ritual that creates sound. Like you can have drummers drum like for like 9 hours, like all night or something, And that's sort of like how I see this this particular way of musicking, with digital technology.
Okay. And, in this great soundscape of a conversation, I know it is time for me to stop. This has been an absolute joy. I appreciate it. Let's tell the good people where they can find your music.
Yeah, thank you, Cedric. I mean, my music I hope, is easy to find. You have a website, markusreuter.com, Markus with a K, and Reuter without an H. In Germany, a lot of people write.
We're going to put it right. We're going to put it right down there so everybody can see how to spell it properly.
No X also. And you see what. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate all sorts of. I want to be sent emails, and I have this YouTube channel. I have the podcast, Markus Reuter podcast, and it's on all the services. Like, you just need to type it into the search field and you'll find it. And yeah, I think like nowadays, finding people is not the big issue anymore. You actually need to have an interest in actually wanting to find them.
Right.
Actually wanting to type, Cedric Hendricks into Amazon and get that book,
Right.
Right. But it's right there.
Yeah, it's right. It's right there, and I wouldn't mind if you had the urge to read it. That would be great.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, so but I appreciate. Like I said, it's a very important to me. I appreciate people contacting me. I think this is like what, maybe as a last thought here, because like talking about the music business, I think it's a big misunderstanding. Like the record companies have kind of like given people the idea that stars are always busy.
Right.
That is not the case. Why people drink or take drugs? Because they're bored. It's
Right.
not that they have a lot. Maybe they are allowed to make a record like every year, once in a while, but they would love to be in the studio all the time, but they're not allowed to, and so they start drinking. But so you know what I mean? Like it's certainly in the past it used to be a big problem. Now it's not that much a problem anymore, I think. But anyway, so I appreciate fan mail.
Then by all means, let's give this man something to do. Please. Once again, enjoy things over there in Germany. I'm hoping to see you in the States soon. Let's hope this.
Yeah, I hope so too.
This thing clears up, and we will talk to you soon. Thanks again for taking the time to talk to us.
Oh, I appreciate it very much.
Take care.
Thank you, Cedric. Yeah.